Welcome to a Whirlybird Productions podcast with me, Helen Curston. We explore film finance and distribution, featuring insights from filmmakers, entertainment lawyers, and industry experts. Welcome today to Gareth Ellis-Unwin, Academy BAFTA award-winning producer and CEO of multi-award-winning Bedlam Film Productions. I love the name of Bedlam Film Productions, by the way. Best film production name. Amongst your many credits with Bedlam, you produced King's Speech, the highest grossing British independent film of all time. That's amazing, including 7 BAFTAs, Best Film, Outstanding British Film, and 4 Academy Awards, including Best Film. And more recently, you were head of film and animation at Screen Skills, supporting new filmmakers, working with professionals to identify what the industry needs, how we keep moving forwards, and giving us the skills that's needed for training and strategy to support these. So obviously now, having reduced your career to 3 short paragraphs, I would like to hear from you a bit about, how did you get started? What's your own story with film?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? The factor of 3 comes in yet again, because I always joke that my career to date has had the sort of classic film script 3-act structure. So the first act of my career was I was a assistant director. So I did that, Helen, for 13 years, and really enjoyed just working on a variety of content, varying levels of production in terms of budget, varying jurisdictions around the world, etc., etc. The second act in my sort of career history today has been setting up Bedlam with Simon Egan and going on to produce 8 movies and probably about 50 hours of TV programming under that banner. And then most recently, the third act, which always makes me worry because it's sort of like, am I coming to the end of it all? But the third act has been the work that I've done around training and education. But all of that came about, I won't say by chance, but by sort of I think one of the funniest things whenever I'm talking on these things, everyone imagines that I had this preordained plan that was perfectly laid out that
What,
I've
you mean
been
you
to
didn't? You
for all of
didn't
it.
have the
No,
grand
I've
plan?
been
Okay.
making it up as I go along for nearly 30 plus years now. And the truth of it is, if you want to work in the creative industries, you're going to have to be flexible and agile, and it's not going to give you the structured framework that you might enjoy in another sector. But the things that we might consider failings in our sector are also its benefits. We
Yeah.
majority work for ourselves, we majority run our own companies, we majority get to pick and choose the projects that we're part of. So, with the lack of formal structure comes amazing freedoms, and I'm just that sort of spirit where I actually enjoyed those freedoms. So yeah, it wasn't sort of preordained. I mean, I always had a fascination with storytelling. I loved film as a child. I enjoyed going to the cinema, and in fact, the first time I ever saw my dad cry was watching E.T. At Slough Odeon. My
Great film.
mum used to
Great
take
film.
me to like the old Sinbad movies up at the Hemel Hempstead cinema when I was a kid and stuff. So I had a fascination around story and storytelling, but grew up in a part of the world that, albeit I was only 6 miles down the road from Pinewood, didn't produce filmmakers. My mum and dad weren't in the industry; they were teachers. I didn't have friends whose parents were in the industry, so And I remember, even though I had a Saturday job, I did actually have a Saturday job at Pinewood at the age of 13, where I basically swept the floors and emptied the bins. But even though I had I remember sitting down with my careers teacher at the age of 14, saying, "Oh, I want to work in the movies," and she just looked at me blank faced as if, and she actually told me I wasn't academically bright enough, which was
Wow.
a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. But yeah, it's the same careers advisor 23 years later that invited me back with my Oscar to celebrate the fact that I just produced the
Oh,
independent
sweet.
film. So yeah, yeah.
Sweet moment.
Not that I'd recommend harboring grudges for 23 years. But no, so it was a chance opportunity, really. I'd never realized that I could professionalize what was a slightly hobbyist ambition. And it was when I took my sister down for her A-level interviews that I saw some media students at Weymouth College running around with cameras and a sound boom and other bits, and got talking to them and found that you could actually go to college and learn this stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'd left school before my A levels, university was never really a trajectory that I was on, but further education was something that I could consider. And I was just really enthused by the conversations I'd had with those media students, and thankfully, I actually on that day got to meet Paul Casper, who was the head of media. He pretty much offered me a space on the spot, which was quite cool. And
Brilliant.
it was the start of the education piece. And I went from there, where I did a national diploma, a BTEC national diploma in media, to go on to do a higher national diploma at Ravensbourne, which I was there in the early 90s, and graduated from Ravensbourne knowing how to work a photocopier and make a cup of tea. And that was the two essential
These are
skills.
key skills for life.
And still,
Yes.
there is nothing that a crew member likes more than a brew made by me, because it just, yeah, you need to be able to keep those skills up. So I
Amazing.
find it quite funny when I'm on these sort of panels looking to sort of reflect on what's now it is actually this year, it's a 30-year career in the industry. That there wasn't a master plan, there wasn't this preordained sort of roadmap to follow. And I think that, a lot of filmmakers, young, old, and both in between, put themselves under so much pressure to try and get it all right. And that there's a plan that can be followed. And, yes, there are some easy things to avoid, which we'll touch on. And I know we're going to talk about that through
Yeah.
today's podcast. But, the key things are remaining resilient and remaining agile in your thinking, to be adaptive. You're never going to quite know when that next opportunity might arrive. And it's, remaining open to those opportunities and seeing them for what they might be. So, yeah.
So on that sort of note of the changes, the challenges, that resilience, what are you noticing as a producer is around you and has been happening that maybe is affecting you and what you do? What's the sort of bigger picture for producers like yourself at the moment?
Well, I think let's talk to the slightly the important areas of mental health and equity, access, and diversity. I've seen change in the 30 years I've doing. Are we there? No. Have we got as far as we need to go? No. But I do see positive changes that have happened in the workplace in the time that I've been here. And look, I sit here as someone that 10, 15, 20 years ago maybe wasn't making the right recruitment decisions in terms of where I was looking for talent or the stories that I wanted to tell. So, I think there's an admission of guilt that we of my generation have to accept, that we weren't getting it right 20, 30 years ago. And that's led to the some of the challenges we have now. So I do think that we're seeing change. I think we are seeing opportunity shift. I think we are starting to hear voices that previously have been unheard, and that's all for the betterment of the industry. I think it makes us stronger. I think the workplace is getting kinder. I remember the sort of brutalist regime that I trained under, which was very aggressive, very full of toxic masculinity, and just a tough place to survive. And when you are working freelance and working all manner of hours and putting your love, sweat, and tears into something, to be in a very sort of hostile and aggressive environment is really tough. So again, don't claim that we've got there yet, but we're definitely seeing a change. And so, for example, one of the little things to give an exemplar of that. So I recently conducted a big training exercise at Shinfield Studios, where we had 95 strong crew that was a mix of local students and local residents, come together to do a short film over the course of 3 days, run under professional sort of working practices. And it was the first time I was able to instill this. And what we did at the start of the day, as you'll probably know, the first thing that you do when the crew all comes together is you do a quick health and safety chat. Don't trip over things, don't plug things in that you don't
Slips,
know
trips, and
what they
falls,
do.
everyone.
Exactly, all that stuff. And we always pay so much attention to the physical safety aspect of filming. This was the first time I was actually able to insist that we spent 5 minutes at the start of the shoot talking about our mental health and well-being for the shoot. So I established my ground rules as a producer. I didn't expect there to be any shouting. There was going to be no tolerance of bullying behaviour. If anyone had a concern, then these were the reporting lines to follow. And it was just interesting to see physical health and safety put alongside mental health and well-being
So
in a
important.
5-minute chat. And everyone, the amount of the crew that came, even the professional crew, even the heads of department, they said that's the first time we've seen that on a set, and we like that.
Oh, it's amazing. I
Just
don't think
setting
I've ever seen that, actually.
the
That
tone.
permission to have that need and that respect, and
Yeah,
it's sort of like it lays it out. It's
yeah,
visible. It's
yeah. Because
brilliant.
I think one of the challenges is the bullying behaviour and being in an aggressive environment, and typically masks your opportunity to establish your requirements of your crew. You know, if you're being very
Mm.
simple, you're saying, look, you have the right to come to work, be treated fairly, enjoy your time at work, and go away as mentally well as you arrived. But whilst you're here, I expect excellence. You know, that's simple. I just need you to be the best of you. I want you to absolutely deliver your A game. I'll create the environment that's safe and
Exactly.
caring, but let's fly together. Let's, you know, no pun intended, considering the project that I'm going to talk about later on. But
Yeah.
yeah, let's get the best out of people. And I always found that as an AD, as an assistant director, you know, it was always better to sort of nurture and support than to shout, you know, and I just think that
Mm.
that's since sort of trickled into how I produce things. But I think, you know, fundamental change, trying to keep it brief because I know that this, you know, we're not here for a 3 hour chat. You know, I think the workplace is improving in terms of access, equity, diversity, and also kindness once there. But we have to recognise that we're not fully there yet. We have to talk about the streamers if we're going to talk about sort of
Yeah.
a shift in the ecosystem over the last 10 years. I think that's a big thing, and I know we're going to talk about that specifically.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I think just I'm seeing a greater spread of stories that are being told. You know, if you to look at this year's BAFTA nominations, for example, which have just been announced. I know there's once again a lot of contention over representation in certain key categories and also the story. But if you actually just look at the types of stories that are being told this year, in terms of what's being portrayed, represented, you know, it's a really eclectic mix, and I think that's what gives me
Brilliant.
a lot of encouragement going forward. Is that, you know, we've been telling stories through the medium of film for 120 years, and yet we can still come up with unique stories that are a clever way of telling something or feels more modern, or, you know, there's just, this is the vibrancy of what we do for a living, you know.
Yeah. It's always evolving, isn't it? And I think that is our, that is our challenge and our gift to keep up with that change, to do things that are different, to listen and to be observant of the world around us, so that we are reflecting that world and we are bringing it into our work, and the people like you've described are doing that importantly and being represented. So yeah, just to pick up on that thing of, how, for example, with the streamers, what does that mean in terms of your role? How is that impacting the work that you do? And are there, and I'm sure with anything there's pros, cons, and something in between.
Mm.
What's your feeling about that?
Well, look, let's start with the positives for sure. You know, the arrival of the streamers was the shot in the arm that the content creation system really needed. You know, we were starting to get into an overly traditional way of assessing projects and the value of a story. We were in a place where the stranglehold on the commissioning was getting ever tighter and tighter and smaller. And you know what the joy of the streamer boom gave us was that there was suddenly a number of new players in the market that had a different approach to commissioning, that were prepared to take risk and were prepared to sort of back projects to a financial level that had almost gone away in the independent sector. So, you know, I am not the sort of producer that's going to sit here and decry the arrival of the streamers as being the death knell for film production or other. You know, there's been a lot of money that's come into the sector via the streamers that are seeing great benefit. I think if we are going to look at some of the pitfalls associated with that, I think we have, although there's more money in the sector, that money arriving has a very specific character. And I think one of the challenges is the way that the streamer investment comes into a project where they take all worldwide rights all across the same, you know, across the world at the same time. No easy further exploitation. You're only ever going to
Mm.
get what you get. So, for
Yeah.
example, you're not going to see a runaway hit like the King's Speech. The King's Speech, you know, you mentioned highest grossing British independent of all time. That I think is a record that will last forever now
Mm.
because of the way we fundamentally distribute content. You know, that will never change. You won't get a runaway hit like that because, you know, on a streamer deal, you've got your costs of productions that are covered. You've got an uplift against the costs of production, which means your investors, your financiers are happy because they've got a bit more of a secure investment, you know, but what is limiting about that is that you won't then see something play theatrically that suddenly gets a surge of support that then sets a new set of values against all the further exploitations of. So I
Mm.
think whilst it shows great benefit, you know, the limiting thing is that you're not going to get the same level of runaway successes. You know, I think what's interesting about this, the streamer arrival is where we were in a position where we had a given set of commissioners or studios that we could take content to for support. You know, we've now got some new ones,
Yeah.
but they operate in a very, very similar way. I mean, a streamer deal is the same as doing a studio deal in my mind. You know, you are pretty
Yeah.
much doing most of your rights. You are giving over to a limited period of exposure where someone else will control the viewing figures, the income, the numbers. So I
Yeah.
think it's a different model of working, but has a lot of the sort of common tropes of the sort of the bigger studio world.
Yeah.
But it's great that there are other people to turn to. I mean, pre-streamers, you know, if you couldn't secure a British broadcaster in your finance plan for a British film, you were going to have a challenging time getting that film financed and set
Yeah.
up. Um, so yeah, there's that. I think there being another positive around the Trillium arrival is that I think that they are prepared to give lesser experienced names a chance. I think I've seen
Yeah.
that in all of them. You know, there has been directors given opportunity to work on bigger shows than they've maybe worked on before. You know, there are writers that are writing for streamer commissions that probably wouldn't get the same recognition if they were sort of looking at terrestrial broadcast or a more traditional studio deal. So I think all of those are benefits. I think given what we're talking about here today, one of the downsides to all of this, and I think I'm starting to see it, I'm not seeing it clearly, but starting to see it, is that the art of producing is becoming a very different thing. You know,
Yeah.
it's a single source financier. You know, if you can go and strike a Netflix deal or a movie deal or an
Yeah.
Apple deal, you know, your ability to piece together other jurisdictions or other pieces of money or other forms of investment, the complexity or the art of producing is starting to fall away. Now, some might argue,
Yeah.
great, you know,
Yeah,
wonderful.
because it is complex. It is difficult. It isn't something everyone can
Yeah, but
achieve
with
successfully. But
yeah, but within it you have flexibility. You know,
yeah.
if I say I've got Project A, I go and set up with a streamer, and the streamer wants to take it all worldwide, all worldwide, all rights for a 2 year period. I know that I'm going to I'm going to find real difficulty in trying to get any value out of that project once their window has closed because
Yeah.
everyone would have seen it. You
Yeah.
know, so I'm
Yeah.
not going to get a physical, and physical is starting to come back. Physical sell through, sorry, home entertainment physical is something that's coming back now, but if someone's been able to
So you mean
indulge
like,
in
sorry,
project
DVDs? Is
like
that? Yeah.
DVDs,
Yeah.
or I mean more modern, digital packages that sit on
Sure.
a server somewhere, but to buy and to own is starting to come back in,
Mm,
and if someone's seen a project sat on a streaming site for 2 years, chances are they probably would have been able to see it once, twice, three times. So, what value is that going to have to sit on a
yeah.
server, or to sit on a shelf? So we're seeing that. So I think it definitely helps unsophisticated producers because it means that they can just go to a single source of financing and it's a
Hmm.
yes no decision. Great, they're fully financed. If it's a yes no, then they've got to find someone out. But I'm just sort of seeing it's like I get we obviously get quite a lot of CVs and projects that come in to us, and
Yeah.
starting to see people sort of referring to themselves as creative producers. It's like, I've got an idea, I've got a project, but I'm a creative producer. I don't really understand the money side of things. It's like, right, well, being a producer means you have to understand the creative and the commercial because they're
Yeah.
two sides of the same coin. If you can't do one or the other, then you're not a fully
Yeah.
fledged producer, or a producer with a capital P, as I call it.
Okay. It's not going to actually result in a product. It's not
No,
going to
no, it's you're a
come to
creative
fruition.
producer. Well,
Yeah.
that's great, So, when we get projects that come to us, and it's like, oh, I'm more of a creative producer, can't really put it together, and it's like, okay, well, have you spoken to these streamers? And they say, yeah, we pitched it, and they didn't like it. It's like, right, well,
Yeah. That
that
tells you something important.
that tells you something,
Yeah.
So, I remember, it's funny, I'm preparing for a webinar that we're going to look back at one of my older projects, which is probably the most complex international co-production I've ever produced, which was a project called Zaytoun,
Mhm.
which was made in Israel in 2013. And it was a UK, French, Israeli, Palestinian territories,
Wow. That is
UK
complex.
co-production,
Excuse me.
tripartite agreement. So it was a three-way co-production. with pre-sold territories in each of the, and it was very, very, I always remember the closing on that. So the closing is a period of time you go through when everyone's made their offers of support, and you're trying to bring everything together so that it sits alongside each other, and you can go forward with what they call the IPA, the inter-party agreement. And the inter-party agreement is the thing that binds all of those that are putting money in. The collection account management agreement is the contract that defines everyone that's taking money out. So those two agreements become your most important closing documents, but they are all multi-party. So everyone that's part of that part of the process is a signatory. And you've got this sort of herding cats process of trying to get everyone. And of course, no one wants to go first, no one wants to go last. There's a whole jockeying thing. Well, through the process of closing the finance on that film, we had to complete 73 individual agreements and contracts that all had to be enforced by the time that we could consider ourselves formally closed. And I was literally sat by a fax machine, because everything for some reason still had to be done by fax back in 2013. Sat there, it was literally, I mean, the chapter in the autobiography, if I ever get to write it, will be called sign, scan, repeat. Because I'd get a bit of paperwork in, I'd sign it off, and then that would go back out to the lawyers and stuff. And we're just not seeing projects of that complexity come together. And the sad thing is that means that films like Zaytoun, which we've got to acknowledge the current political climate, I probably couldn't get made now. And I know that there are many views on both sides of the argument that we're not going to get into on this podcast, but it was a unification story. It was a story of peace. And I don't think we would get the film away, A, because of its subject matter now, but B, because of just how complex it was to try and get it to close and to be financed at, what was it, $7.6 million.
Wow. And was there a point in that process when you're not sure if it's actually all coming in? Are you sort of, you're waiting?
Well, there's the benefit of when you're putting together an independent film and you are structuring it under a completion bond, you have the benefit of knowledge that once closed, the money is there with certainty because everyone's done their due diligence. So, but then if you're a good producer, your worry then shifts elsewhere, because it's like, right, okay, now we've got the money. Are we spending it wisely? Are we doing it the best we can? Are we staying on budget? Are we staying on track? So the notion of there is a moment wherever the producer is completely relaxed and calm is a misnomer. I mean, the other thing is, people have got to remember, typically a producer's the first one on a project because they've either found the script, found the idea, found the director that they want to work with. And they're also the last person on the project because they're still doing the collection reports and stuff. So, I've got films that I produced 16 years ago that once a year I still have to sit down and do the collection account sort of verification and check that, all the money that was due to be brought in has been brought in, and that everyone's got paid what they're due to get paid, if anything. So, you have a long lasting relationship with all of your projects that go far beyond just the, pre-production, production and post period. It's a long-standing thing. But it's one of those things, I've decried the fact that people send in a note about, oh, I'm a creative producer, and that in my eyes is only half the business. But quite often people say, well, what is it that a producer does? Because a producer in the structure of a film school or a university degree or on a short film is very different. Yes, they'll raise a bit of money, but chances are the producer is pretty much the facilitator, the enabler of the project to happen in terms of the non-creative side. So just keeping the show running,
management generally of
just general overseeing with maybe some involvement in the creative. But a commercial producer as I am, I mean, you've got to remember, I pay my mortgage from the money I earn from making movies. I make movies that cost money and need to be made effectively so that I can have a salary. And when people say, oh, well, what's the easiest way of describing the role of producer? I found my favorite sort of anecdote, metaphor, whatever the phrase is, for example, if I go into a school and I'm talking about the role of producer to people that just have no idea how our industry works, I say, well, a producer's like a property developer. A property developer will see a parcel of land and they will know what that parcel of land is going to cost. The property developer will have an idea of whether they want to build some houses there, a factory there, a hospital there, and they will know the associated costs and timeline of building that, whether it's a block of flats, whether it's a estate of houses, whether it's a factory, or whether it's a hospital. And the property developer has to have a reasonable expectation that once they've spent the time, raised the money, built the property, that it's going to realise a market value, and that
Yeah, you
market
get your
value
return.
to be significant enough to
Yeah,
either make your return or make a profit. And a film producer is a producer is exactly the same, but the
yeah,
property that
great
we look
analogy.
at is intellectual property. So I'll look at an idea, I'll know what it'll cost for me to acquire the rights in that idea. I'll have a sense of how I want to develop that idea, whether for television, for film, for a game, for an app, whatever.
Mhm.
I'll have an idea of the cost of production. I'll have an idea of the timeline of production, but I have to reasonably able to forecast with some certainty the
Mm.
market value of that entity once complete, because
Yeah.
that's borrowing against, or that's what I'm selling the opportunity
Yeah,
to.
speculatively looking ahead and seeing. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's typically, there's 3 or 4 ways that you bring money into a film. And, I always try and encourage directors, producers, writers, every crew member. You can make whatever film you want
Yeah.
at whatever cost you want, as long as you've got the money.
Yeah.
As long as you can,
Yeah.
and if you haven't got the money, you're going to have to provide an audience, because the audience is where you'll be able to drive money from.
Yeah.
So as soon as you need an audience and you want to tell a story that's going to cost you more than what you've got in your back pocket, then you have to start thinking about things in commercial terms. And the students that I work with, the degree levels and master level
Mm.
students I work with, I
Hmm.
try and encourage them to start thinking about that, because even whilst on a course and whilst in education, you have the blessing of being in a sheltered workshop.
Yeah.
Your kit doesn't cost any money, your time comes free, the time of your peers to help you on that project all comes for free. And yes, you may go on into your post-education life and still get together groups of friends that have got their own kit, and you can make something for nothing. Brilliant. If you can afford to, if you can make your content at no cost to
Yeah.
anyone, get out there, tell your stories, do it,
Yeah.
because you've got no excuse. As soon as you start to have to make things that means you're going to have proper cash money to go and make it, whether that's feeding your crew or putting fuel in a generator or paying an
Mm.
actor to be on set for a day, once you start having to spend real money, you have to see your projects as a commercial entity, because they
Yeah.
have no value outside of the creative, outside of the storytelling. They have no commercial value until you can get someone to pay to want to watch that thing.
Yeah.
So starting to look at things in commercial terms, it isn't dirty. It's not something that we should be
No,
ashamed
it's
of.
just real life. It's the
Real life.
reality of how to do it. You can't
Yeah.
do it without it.
If you want to make art house movies that a very select group of people will want to go and see, absolutely brilliant, but make it for
Yeah.
the money that they're going to want to pay to go and see
Yeah.
it. You
And you
get
see people go to like kind of crowdfunding and stuff, and obviously they know then
yeah,
they've got that audience there that
yeah,
comes with that group of people.
yeah.
And then, yeah, you've actually got someone.
Crowdfunding's great. I've done three
Yeah.
campaigns, and they've always been for development money, which development money is the hardest money to raise in the
Mm.
industry.
Yes.
And if you can get a couple of hundred like-minded people that are all prepared to put in 20, 30 quid, and
Yeah.
follow you on your journey to get something made, then great. Crowdfunding's never going to make a movie much beyond a couple of hundred grand,
Yeah.
so you're never going to get a commercial hit in terms of one that plays in cinemas and the bigger festivals and gets on TV for that sort of number.
Yeah.
Uh, but crowdfunding is a reasonable means by which to raise a small amount of money. One thing that I would heartily recommend, having done 3 of them now, don't underestimate how much work a professionally run crowdfunding campaign is.
Yeah. You've got to keep it
We all
alive.
see it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and people want updates, people want
Yeah.
content, people want
They're
you to
investing
deliver
in
on
it
your
as a
pledges.
living, breathing
They're investing.
entity. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether someone's investing £1 or £1,000,000. You then have a responsibility to that
Yeah.
investor to keep them informed, to keep them up to date, and to show them that you're working. There's a lot of people that go, "Oh, crowdfunding, that's just asking friends and family for a few quid," and it's not. It's bigger than
Yeah.
that. But yeah,
Yeah. You've got that community there and they're excited by it and they want to find out, what's happening. And yeah, I think, looking at sort of the bigger picture now of sort of independent film, where are we at for independent production in this country? I mean, that's a
Ah,
big statement to try and fulfill. But it's over to you, Gareth.
right.
How do you feel things are for new indies or even any indies currently?
Okay. Well, firstly, we have to reflect on the non-indie space, before we start jumping
Sure.
into the concerns. Okay. So, look, following the strikes, we are about to see a production surge in the UK that will be on par with, if not greater than, our recovery from COVID. The UK is going to get massively busy. That is clear as the nose on my face. That is going to be brilliant for all of the technicians and crew that have gone without work for the last 9 months.
Mm.
And I have nothing but respect and compassion for those that have struggled through the last 9 months. I've got
Mm.
friends that are DOPs that have been delivery drivers for a Podo to just get money in, and there's no harm in that. And I think anyone that's standing up and moaning about the fact that we're going to get really busy is unfairly
Yeah.
recognizing just how effing tough it's been for a lot of
Yeah.
people for the last year. So we're about to face this massive production surge. I'm confident.
Hmm.
We're going to see a lot of inward investment. We're going to see a lot of US content either restart the productions that they had underway that got put on pause because of the strikes, or new content that's been created during the strikes. Because, one of the things that we do as a creative community, we never sit on our hands. No one's just had the last 9 months off. Well, I'll qualify that. My own personally held views is that there are certain organisations in the UK that could have done a lot more during the strikes, but they had 9 months off. But most creatives just kept on writing, kept on coming up with ideas, conceptualizing, creating ideas and stuff. So I think for the inward investment market, things are looking very positive. All those people with new studio space, like I'm closely aligned with Shinfield Studios. I'm really pleased to starting to see more of the bookings coming in, and
Oh, brilliant.
all of that sort of value chain around hiring company, hire companies and stuff. That's going to be buoyant, and I'm really pleased.
Yeah.
They've gone through a drought. They deserve to have the boom period.
Yeah.
What that's going to do, unfortunately, is adversely affect an already under great pressure independent sector.
Mm.
So, we have a number of fundamental challenges in the independent space at the moment. We have a very limited set of distributors in the UK that will pick up independent content. We're probably down to less than half a dozen now.
Mm.
Of those that can actually release a film of scale, you're probably talking a two or three. So, the studios control the majority distribution opportunity in the UK, as do the streamers. So point one is that we were under pressure anyway as the independent
Yeah.
sector. Point two is we are broken in terms of the way in which we bring money, non-traditional finance into the independent ecosystem, the lack of respect we show that money whilst it's with us, and the unlikeliness of them ever recouping that money or seeing profit. We've behaved abysmally over the last 30, 40 years. We just don't treat anyone's money with the same respect. So for example, I have an investor in Bedlam who has also put money into a phone-based app, a game. He gets his reporting daily. How many apps have sold, how many in-game purchases there's been, how much money his app has made on a day-by-day basis. The reporting is clear and transparent. The money coming back out to him happens to him weekly. There's no waiting for a year for an annual statement from a collection account to then find out that actually the money's already been spent. So the transparency that's lacking in the film recoupment and recovery space is shocking. I mean, no one would want it to go towards a regulated world. I think that puts too much stricture around things. But we've pretty much treated any inbound money that's non-traditional fairly poorly for a number of years now. There are too many stories of people's money getting wasted, abused, and not used in the way that they put it forward in. So we need to do a big cleanup campaign. So before we start crying to government that there's not enough money in the ecosystem, why don't we get our house in order? Why don't we find a better way of reporting? Why don't we find so in this day and age where I know that Comscore can give me every ticket sale at the point at which that screening has started in that cinema and can report that back to my phone automatically, Why does that have to then go up to up to an exhibitor, from an exhibitor to a distributor, from a distributor to a sales agent, from the sales agent to the collection account, from the collection account management company down to me as a producer, where I don't
Wow.
know until 3 to 6 months later how something's performed. So we've got to just clean all of this up. If we don't, we can't ask for any more money from government. We can't ask for any more money from the bigger investment groups. I have the benefit now of working with some very, very high level investors, and I've carried most of them with me through all of our Bedlam project. These are also the people that are being asked to invest in hotels, into restaurant chains, into clothing companies, all of those other sectors. They can clearly see how their money comes in. They can clearly see how their money's spent. They can clearly see how their money is reported on. And
Yeah.
until we clean up our act, I don't think we can ask for any more money from government or the investment community. So I think that's something that needs to happen.
And who would drive that cleanup? Who needs to kind of take that ownership to make that clear and a more simple, transparent
I
process?
think from a strategy perspective, it has to be BFI and PACT. They are our appointed representatives in this regard. So I think they've got some heavy lifting to do. The problem is that it's an awkward conversation for them, because how do you clean up the independent space without looking for a more positive alignment with the non-independent space? And everyone, trust me, I've sat in rooms with these people. Everyone is fearful of
Mm,
losing that inward investment. The UK Film Commission, PACT, BFI, just look at the way that we're celebrating those big US studios
mm.
films shot here last year. Great,
Yeah.
brilliant. Okay. But we paid as taxpayers 20% for them to be here. Now,
Yeah,
no one
exactly.
wants to touch the tax reliefs, and there is a
Mm,
question over whether we'll have the same government come next year at this
mm.
time. But the BFI, PACT, and the British Film Commission really need to help us clean up the act of the independent space, and that means we've got to have some awkward conversations with our non-independent partners and
Mm.
supporters.
Yeah.
So there's that. But it's not all doom and gloom. The last thing I'd say is that I am finding on my projects, because I have a track record and because I operate in a transparent way and I've
Mhm.
got a good reputation, I'm finding that there is money in the marketplace to find,
Brilliant.
um, with an honest approach and a very practical approach, and being clear about likelihoods of recoupment, etc. There is money
Yeah.
in the
Manage
investment
those
stream.
expectations.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's been, if you look at the period through COVID and then the period through strikes, people that like investing money in independent film haven't been able to invest money in independent film. So there is money there that, with the right investors and on the right project, you can leverage. So, one
Yeah.
of the projects that I've got that we're developing at the moment, it's finding favour. It's got a lot of positivity around it. I've raised development funds against the work that we've had done over the last year and a half, which included
Amazing.
shooting a proof of concept up at Warner Brothers, which went really well
Hmm.
year before last. So, the money's out there, but it just needs to be carefully approached and then treated with respect when it arrives.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's lots in there, and it does feel like, there are positives, but it's I suppose some of the people we're talking to is those new filmmakers. There's
Yeah,
always that, number one, you're learning, you're still
yeah,
growing, you're
yeah,
figuring out the complexities, and they are complex from
yeah.
what you've just described. So do you feel like there's any sort of particular tips or red flags, if you were talking to yourself starting out now, but you had that benefit of the thing you can't get till many years later,
Yeah.
hindsight?
Yeah.
What sort of gems or thoughts or warnings might you sort of pass on?
Okay, so firstly, you only ever get someone's attention fresh once.
Mm,
And what I am consistently disappointed by is when I get a project sent to me, whether it's got a full script, whether it's conceptual, whether it's just a sort of pitch deck that is not fully developed.
mm,
Your time is your time. It only starts to cost money. It only starts to cost me money when I start looking at it. So, one of the things don't ever do is to send something that you're not completely satisfied with to someone, and then as soon as they criticize it, go, oh no, no, there's another script coming, or oh no, no, well, we didn't. Do you know what?
yeah.
Well, Jamie Jamie's the one that's got good spelling, and Jamie wasn't around to do a spell check, but we wanted to get it to you this weekend. It's like, no, wait until Jamie or whoever is there to do the spell check. Too many ideas come to me way too early. I develop my own ideas. I'm quite happy to. So, for example, one of the things we've got going, goes back to a news item I saw 8 years ago. I'm happy to put the time and effort into developing those ideas because they're mine. I don't want to develop your idea. If you're sending me something that you want to partner with Bedlam to go and make, I'm not interested in developing it with you. You should have got it to a point where you're ready to share it with me. Um, so a major pitfall is sending stuff too soon out of, youthful inexperience and optimism. But no, things as basic as poorly formatted scripts, for me to look at a script and think it's a script, it needs to look like a script. So if you haven't bothered to properly format it, that's an instant no for me. Making sure that the ideas are fully developed. I don't look at things in a vacuum. I don't care how strong they are creatively. I have to know that there's an audience there for it. So, and that audience has to be in balance with the proposition. So, if you're coming to me and telling me you're going to give me Star Wars, but you're somehow telling me it's only going to cost £1 million, I'm not going to believe you. So finding that balance between concept and likely commercial realization.
And what sort of evidence might you want, sort of audience-wise? What is the information that is there?
It can just sometimes be a few lines. Comps are always strong. Comparable films that have been made in a similar genre for a similar budget with a reasonable cast. I typically in my pitch packs will include 4 or 5 comps, and they will be both a creative and commercial comparison. But don't quote me something that was made 20 years ago. And definitely don't try and pitch me the next King's Speech, because that pisses me off. I try not to use coarse language on these things, but don't tell me you can do a King's Speech, because I know you probably can't, because we barely didn't. And also I've done one of those. Do you know what I mean? So I think market awareness is a big thing, so comparisons, looking at who you're wanting to partner with and why are they a good fit. I have a strong ambition to make a horror film at some point. There's not one in my canon of work, and I've always promised to my sister that before I stop producing, I'll make a proper shit your pants scary movie, because she likes horror. This will probably now lead to me getting about 50 submissions for horror films.
As I rewind quick.
Yeah. I've got one that I'm developing, but looking at the person that you're speaking to, track record, the type of content they create, having a sense of, maybe it's something that's going to be a bit different for them, but make sure that you can acknowledge that. If someone sent me, I always like it, the good version of an email for me is, dear Gareth, I recently saw XXX, or I recently rewatched YYY, which I know you produced. I thought it was a good piece of work. Love a bit of flattery, always kick off there. Good start.
Connect.
Yeah, I have a project that I've been developing for a little while. It's in such and such a genre. It sits at this sort of budget level. I think these audiences would be good, would be good for it. My elevator pitch is that it's X project meets Y project, and I think it's sort of in the same vein as a film 3 years ago called ... Could I send you just a 1-page outline? I don't want to read a script until you've sent me something much, much shorter. I'd much rather get a log line, which it typically shouldn't be many more than 25 words, and a 1-page treatment to decide whether I want to read the script. Because what people don't realize when they submit a script, they sort of think, fire in a script, Gareth will read it. It's a couple of hours out of his life. Well, it's not. For me, reading a script, because I'll always read it twice, once for story content and plot, and story, character and plot, and secondly for just how do you do it from a sort of production perspective. So it's 2 reads. I don't read quickly, because I make sure that I'm trying to properly absorb the script. So you're basically saying, I want a day of your life. That send me a script, you're saying, Gareth, I want a day of your life, which I'm not going to give you anything in return for, apart from the fact you might want to pick up this project. So think about it in those terms.
Who's reading it? Think about their time and their life and what they've got.
And again, that then comes back to making sure that it's unique. Know your market. quite often people will pitch me stuff and it'll come via my assistant. I'll go, okay, well that sounds like so and so that was done 3 years ago. It's amazing the amount of filmmakers that sort of think because they've had the idea for the first time, no one else has ever done it, and they haven't bothered going to check.
Yeah.
So I think if you've got an idea, really work hard on trying to find out if anyone's done it before, and if they have, what's particularly unique about your take on it that's
Yeah.
going to make it different. So I think, being ready to share material only when it's fully developed, being cognizant of the fact that it is a time investment from the person that's looking at the project if they're going to seriously consider it, and to have a sense of its commerciality or its marketability. All of those things are really fundamentally important for me.
Oh, that was just absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I think that's, there's so many gems in there. I think people are going to be pausing these now, You're going to get some emails that are going to have your statements in them coming through. You know
That's all
that
right. That's right.
But they're going to be good.
They'll get picked up by someone else other than me, and then we'll see. Yeah. Okay, and
Um,
let's be really, really honest, and let's have a bit of fun with it. Make sure your idea is not shit, because it is amazing
yeah,
how because you've been close to something for so long,
yeah,
bad ideas suddenly
yeah,
become great in your own mind. So go and
yeah.
pitch it to your
Check them out with other people. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
pitch
those
it to your
those other
flatmate.
reactions are so key, aren't they? They're telling you,
Absolutely.
is
Yeah.
this new? Does this surprise you? Have you
Yeah.
heard this story? Do you care?
And pitching it to a family member who loves you dearly and will never say anything nasty to you because they're worried about hurting your feelings is not a good audience. Go and
No.
find the sarcastic, toughest friend, the
Get your critical friend, as they
your
say.
critical friends in there. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Um, so yeah, sort of again, just sort of wrapping up a little bit. Can you, last sort of thoughts about, what you've got coming up? I know you've sort of hinted at a little bit about your slate at the moment and what's
Yeah.
going on. What's happening for you in the next little
So
while?
the front runner is a project called Anything to Anywhere. Anything to Anywhere was the motto of the Air Transport Auxiliary during the Second World War. They were responsible for delivering the new aircraft out from the factories and recovering the broken and damaged aircraft. And what's of particular interest was in 1941, they started to induct female pilots that had never flown before.
Amazing.
So those women would actually go on and be the first women to be afforded equal pay under UK employment law. Everyone thinks it's the women of
Yeah, it was
Dagenham
the
in
Dagenham, yeah.
1920. No, it's the women of the ATA 1941 were the first to be afforded equal pay to their male counterparts. Amazing stories of
Wow.
heroism and just what they managed to achieve. And they are a group that's been majority airbrushed from history.
Mm,
So it's a strong female empowerment story. I've met some of the women for real a number of years ago. Sadly, a few of them have now passed.
yeah,
And we're in a good place. We shot proof of concept for the project. The script is well advanced. We're about to announce our director and start casting. So we're hopeful that we'll get a late summer shoot on that. And yeah, that's something I'm really excited about. There's a
exciting.
couple of there's a
So
music
lots of good
animation.
locations and
Yeah, I mean, I've
I'm
met.
imagining Spitfires and things. I'm
Oh, there's
seeing,
loads. Yeah. No,
yeah,
I think I now know everyone in the UK that owns a Spitfire, a Tiger Moth, American, or anything else. I've basically spent the last 6 months scouring the UK for airfields and air bases and stuff. So
yeah,
just doing all my homework. But yeah, we're hoping it's going to be, excuse me, the female antidote to Masters of Air, which obviously launches
amazing.
soon. So, and a perspective on conflict that we've not seen before. Women serving in a semi-frontline role. Um,
Yes.
Back as far as 1941.
Well, I'm
So
invested. You've got me.
brilliant. Any money?
Yeah,
Have you
a little bit.
have you have you ever considered investing in independent British?
I would
But yeah, no,
definitely
we're
go and
piecing
get a
that.
ticket.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
mean we're piecing that together. We had a successful round of investment that we ran with our development investors. So that's based on, they put money in, and if the film sees production, they'll see an uplift against that initial investment. But now we're looking at, because it's a $22 million film. We're now looking at the more traditional sources. So I'm talking to the streamers, I'm talking to the distributors, talking to
Yeah,
the equity financiers, and we will find a sort of 3D jigsaw version of this, which brings all those partners in together and hopefully gets us to a close, and we can look to shoot
amazing.
later this year. And I'm not interested in seeing anyone's CVs to work on it yet. I need to make the film a reality before I can hire anyone. But yeah, watch this space.
Incredible. Oh, honestly, it does sound fantastic. I'm actually, and it's like it's that surprising it again. It's like that first telling of a story. You did it brilliant. You log line, you got your USP in there. I know. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
fantastic.
look,
A good example.
if we've got just a couple of seconds
Yeah, of
before we
course.
wrap up, I mean, I could let me.
So yeah, so this is your own pitch deck.
Yeah, so this is something that we created to share with our development investors and now our sort of more traditional sources of film finance. And this gives you a level at which, this is where Bedlam will develop a project to the point of being able to create something like this pitch deck. So um, anything to anywhere is the title of the project. And what I'm trying to achieve within the pitch deck is to give a sense of the sort of look and feel for the film. It's indicative of the film that we're trying to make. Again, keeping the opening very succinct. I mean, that's the log line, the untold story of the trailblazing women who delivered the planes that the RAF flew in battle in World War One. First to receive equal pay, and their
Amazing.
survival was worse than a British soldier in the trenches of World War One. So bang, bang, bang. As soon as you've started to read this, you know the world that we're inhabiting.
Yeah.
We are a visual medium, so my pitch decks have lots of large imagery. It's not lots of text. You have to outline the story. So there's literally just a couple of pages on what the story is. Again, finding imagery that is illustrative or yeah, illustrative of the film that you're trying to make and the show that you're trying to make.
Yeah, you get
Uh,
a sort of emotional reaction to it. You're able to sort of feel it and see it and vision and
exactly.
envision it. Yeah.
Yeah, and keeping it very visual. So I'm producing this alongside Liz Trubridge, who is very well known for her work on Downton Abbey, the film and
Wow.
TV series. There's some stills from the test shoot that we did up at Warner's. Now, obviously, not everyone can take things as far as doing something like our little proof of concept, but
Yeah.
again, showing the project, a bit about the writer and the casting director that we're working with. All of this is commercially
Beautiful.
sensitive information, so I'm happy for it to go on the podcast, but not to be
Yeah.
shared wider than that.
That's
Again,
fine.
keeping it sort of heavy on the imagery. Again, key partners, people that we're working with. We want it to be evocative of the film that we're making. And then there was a big question as I started to talk to people about the aerial work. Well, they were saying, well, who's going to look after that? Because that's obviously a big part of the film. And
Yeah.
Acclaim Picture Company is someone that we're working with that will do all of the aerial photography. And this is
Oh,
stuff
incredible.
that they've shot. And they've got an amazing way of sort of being intimate with the machine. It sort of feels less mechanical and observational. So
Yeah.
John, who's the aerial director, has just got this really intimate way of photographing things. And then because we're based on a true life story, we've included some pictures of the real women.
Oh, there they
You know,
are.
so these were the women of
Beautiful.
the ATA. So again, that's the level at which we would take something
Yeah.
in terms of working up a pitch deck. Now people go, we can't spend that sort of money, we can't do something that glossy. Well, aim
You,
for similar. How
yeah,
close to that can you
you can
get? Do you?
find it something illustrative, as you
Yeah,
said. Even if you can't shoot it, give me
yeah,
the impression of and the aesthetic and the feeling and
yeah. And go and use some imagery that you found. Obviously, you have to be very careful how you
yeah,
use
license
copyrighted
and
images
whatever.
and
Yeah.
licensing and stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's something like. I mean, one of the great benefits I found, well, Simon and I found whilst we were at Ravensbourne, is it put us into a creative community where we could access graphic designers, we could access costume people, we could access other,
Yeah. Get your collaborators. Yeah.
get your collaborators together. And, it
True,
might
true.
be that there's some graphic designers that are at a uni or otherwise that might be prepared to do you a little bit of work for,
Yeah.
the price of a few beers or a nice dinner or a lunch or something. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but always just try and
Fantastic.
keep that benchmark high. But yeah, that's how we develop
That
stuff.
was so helpful. Thank you so, so much for your time today and for your honesty and for what you shared. And I've learnt loads, and I know people listening will have learnt loads from you as well. And like I said, you can't learn it until down the line. So it's
Yeah,
always lovely to be able to hear those things. And yeah, I appreciate your openness and your kindness about what you've said about
yeah,
encouraging people. So
yeah.
thanks very much. It's been
I
a
mean,
pleasure.
one little thing just to leave you with.
Yeah.
Hope you get the scissors in, and
Yeah. We can,
I
yeah.
I know when I'm being very honest about the situation, over here, it can seem a little bit doom and gloom. But the truth of it is, we are talking about an industry that gives you an amazing opportunity to tell stories, and
Yeah.
I always try and encourage people to say, that it's going to be a challenge. You have to remain resilient, do your groundwork, do your market appraisal, but the one thing that the pandemic proved is that we remain as a world hungry consumers of content. We love stories, we love content, and that appetite only ever grows, and that means that our need to supply that hungry beast ever grows. So whilst it might be challenging, difficult, tough, hard, the world is there ready to receive your stories. You've just got to persevere and try and get them made.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That says, yeah, that's absolutely on the nail. Thank you so much for your time.
No
And yeah, looking forward to seeing, your projects when they come out. We'll be keeping a careful watch. Thanks for your time.
Lovely to see you,
Right.
Helen. All the best.
Bye.
If you're enjoying this content and you're finding it valuable, please subscribe to our Patreon page. Without your contribution, the podcast will come to an end. You can find the link through our website, whirlybird Productions /podcast, or our Instagram page, Film Finance Podcast, and follow the link in the bio. Thanks for listening.